Good morning, it's Joshua Taylor coming to you from here in Hope, British Columbia. I got up, I was in bed, and I started thinking about 1 Corinthians 13, where it talks about the love of God. And the Lord put in my spirit to put this video together. It'll probably be a 3-part series. I don't like to keep my videos too long. But if you look at the world today, the world is in crisis. We're seeing migrants coming across our borders, open borders. You know, it's just a matter of time before the blood's going to run the streets here in Canada. You know, what's happened over in Europe and Germany is being orchestrated here. And, but over the last 50 years that I can remember, going back to the 1960s, 1970s, I remember when we lived in Regina, on Princess Street there, we used to go around cutting people's lawns, and I knew everybody around. You know, I knew all my neighbors. And, you know, I knew the people across the street. But today, no one knows their neighbor. No one wants to know their neighbor. Everyone's too busy. And I remember, you know, as the Lord led me from one church camp to another church camp, so to speak. You know, since He came in and saved me back in 1975, you know, a lot of times, if you're a Baptist, well, you're welcome as a Baptist, right? And if you're part of the Pentecostal church and you have that faith, you're welcome. But if you're not, if you're an outsider, say a Pentecostal walks into a Baptist church, usually they're not welcomed. I'm just saying that it doesn't matter what faith that you have. You know, it doesn't matter what your belief standing is. We're all growing at different rates. We're at different places on the mountain. Well, we're still on the same mountain. And I can remember over the years, you could walk into a church and you're welcomed. And you're going back years ago. But now, you walk into church and they barely ask your name. You might, you know, have coffee after service or something like that. But no one really wants to get to know you. And there's not too much hospitality in the church. And that's the main reason why this country's gone to pot, why the world's gone down the tubes, that we allowed our love for our neighbor to dwindle over these past generation of time. And there's consequence, and that consequence is that the enemy's been allowed in to do his thing. You know, if we can't have love one for another, right? As real brothers and sisters, it doesn't matter what our status, it doesn't matter what our belief system is, as long as we believe in the same God, then we should welcome one another as a brother and sister. And, you know, a lot of times, say for example, some new face shows up in the Pentecostal church. I'm not going to pick on the Baptists anymore. You walk in there, and so if you're hurting, maybe you don't have a place to stay, maybe you're lacking food, maybe you can't afford your rent. Like the needs of the people aren't brought up. I remember a brother by the name of Ernie Dorsey. The Lord used him to pastor a church in Seattle back in the 50s and 60s for 10 years. And the glory of God, the very manifest presence of God, was over that church visibly. The visible manifest presence of God was there for 10 years. And how, you know, God ministered to the needs of the people, like the spiritual needs. But he, like after service or before service or whenever during service, he had one common practice. And is that he would ask for those that had need. It didn't matter what, whether it be a prayer, a physical need, or maybe someone was lacking food or couldn't pay their rent, or someone was in the hospital and they not covered by Medicare or whatever. You would ask the people, says, all those of you that have need, line up against the wall here. Okay. And then you would ask all those that have money in their pocket, the ones that were affluent, you line up over there on the other side of the wall. And then he would say, go meet the needs of your brothers and sisters. And this is what's lacking. The needs in the church are not being met. Not being met. And how can we expect to be part of this next move of God if we haven't really come to the place where we are loving one another, meeting each other's needs? Not just by saying a prayer, we're actually meeting the needs. Maybe there's someone on the street that you met that's homeless. A lot of homeless around here. I mean, it's epidemic everywhere now. You meet a person and you get a good feeling about that person. Says, well, why don't you come home and shower and change and have something to eat and maybe stay a day or two. People are scared to say that now, to pick up someone that's homeless on the street, maybe don't have a place to stay, to give them a place to stay, right? And it all comes down to community. Love is community, and that's, back in the pioneer days and things like that, and going back 100 years, people knew their neighbors. They had to. And they learned to meet the needs of each other. If something happened, help was there. Maybe they didn't have faith to move mountains, but they had love in their heart. They knew how to love their neighbor. And over the past 100 years, we've lost that. You see that in the cities, maybe not so much in the country where people are more real. But we've lost our love for our neighbor, for our brothers and sisters. And this is the main reason why the bride, why her garments are spotted. It's not spotted because of this sin and that sin. That our garments are spotted because we've lost our love one for another. And there's, it causes consequence, right? And there's a move of God that's coming. It's not going to be an outpouring of faith. It's going to be an outpouring of the Father's love. And unless we come to the place to learn to be our brother's keeper, to love one another, we're not going to qualify for this next move. It doesn't matter if you've got faith to move mountains. What it talks about in 1 Corinthians 13. If you don't have the love of God in your heart, manifest in your heart, shed abroad in your heart, to love your neighbor as yourself, you don't qualify for this next move, because how can you expect God to pour His love in you, which is far greater, right? There's a reason why the cross has two arms on it, right? Like, why Jesus spread His arms out like this when He died. He was showing us to have love one for another. And we get that by developing our vertical relationship with the Father. So as we develop our relationship with Him, it gives us the relationship to love one another. But if we lose that vertical relationship, we lose our love one for another, and the enemy comes in. And that's exactly what's happening in this country of Canada. And so this next move that's coming, it's going to be judgment. Corrected judgment is coming. We're already into Revelations. And the churches are asleep for the most part. And we need to learn to get back to loving one another, to meeting the needs of one another. If you see your brother and sister in need, meet their needs. And now, you know, it's our bank account that counts. The bigger our bank account, the more important that we are in the church. And you know, the bank's going to fail. The banks are about to repossess the dollars that you have in the bank, where this global reset is already in progress, and people are being paid out for the dinar and things like that. And after these payouts are finished, you know, the banks are, there's going to be another 2008 crash, and it's going to be 10 times worse. And people are going to lose their life savings, and there's not going to be any recovery. Now, what are you going to do then? What's going to keep you from killing the person next door? You know, God's going to allow these harsh times to come so we can learn to love one another again. I'm going to stop it here. I'm going to come back in part 2.